Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar. Our attendees are still joining in, so I'm going to wait a little bit longer just so everyone can join. Okay, we seem to be hitting a bit of a plateau with our attendees here. So hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today, Data Storytelling for Insurance Companies, presented by Phil Schmoyer of Baker Tilly. My name is Brittany Milnick, and I'm the Director of Communications and Technology here at PAMIC. And before we begin today, I just wanted to give a brief thank you to our Platinum sponsors listed on this screen here. These sponsors help with our educational sessions and webinars. As a reminder, this webinar will be rewatchable and is listed on our on-demand section on the pamic.org website. And lastly, if you would like to ask a question during this webinar, please use the Q&A feature on the bottom of your screen. Now, without further ado, I will hand the presentation over to our presenter today, Phil Schmoyer, to begin our presentation.
Thanks, Brittany. Appreciate it. And thanks, everyone, for being here. As Brittany mentioned, today's session is around data storytelling for insurance companies. Really understanding, what's data analytics, what does it mean, how are we, looking at a differential from a maturity factor, and how to really use that data to make more informed, intelligent decisions. Unpacking some types of data, looking at, what kind of data do we get internally, what's available externally, and what types of undiscovered resources might we have that we haven't really thought about in the past. So the hope here is, webinars are very difficult to be more interactive, but really I'm here to answer questions to kind of help guide the discovery of, your journey with data analytics. So please use the Q&A function. I will be answering them on the fly as we walk through, but really hope you get something out of this, and I'm looking forward to spending the next hour with you. So data. Data is one of those emerging assets that a lot of companies are having and have had for many, many years, and they keep expanding, and it keeps growing at an exponential rate. The co-author of Freakonomics had an interesting quote, and I really kind of took this to heart when it comes to storytelling. Data, I think, is one of the most powerful mechanisms for telling stories. I take a huge pile of data and I try to get it to tell stories. So what he means by this is, the data itself that stands alone only gives you one aspect of it. Is when you start to bundle these things together and start to look and uncover similarities or correlations across multiple different data elements or data platforms, you can really start to get to the root cause of some of these issues, some of these challenges. And then there's a point of view that's coming out of it. Why is the data telling us what it is? What's the narrative behind some of the components? And we'll try to explore some of that today in terms of how to go about doing that. There's a lot of data out there. The chief economist from Google forecasts that for the next decades, the ability to take data, to be able to understand it, process it, extract it, visualize it, and communicate it was going to be a hugely important skill of the coming decades. I took this and really the final two pieces. A lot of people look at visualization of data and think that if we can take what used to be in a report and put it into something that's a little more user-friendly, we've done enough. And candidly, you've done a lot to be able to do that. The kind of the groundwork that needs to be laid to have a solid data visualization platform is significant. It's the kind of the what now factor that comes out of some of the visualization. And that's where the storytelling element comes in. It's how do we drive insight? How do we get actionable intelligence out of our data that might be a little bit different than just visualizing a dashboard? And why do we do all of that? We do it so we can understand the details. We can understand where our business came from, where our business is headed. Bezos has a great quote: "If you don't understand the details of your business, you're going to fail." In true black and white version of Bezos, it's either you're successful or you fail. But really the understanding of the details and the data and how we got to where we are and where we're headed, I think is critical for right now at the precipice of what the insurance industry is going through with the insurtech call it evolution, with a lot of data sources coming from a lot of different places, and the ability to utilize that data in new and interesting ways to get to the root of some of our challenges, or interact with our customers a little bit easier. I think understanding the details of what our customers want, which is kind of the essence of Amazon, I think goes to really show the value of data and being able to use those details. So why is data so important? I used the word data so many times in the past week. It's unbelievable. But there's that much data being created. There's multiple studies out there that put a lot of different numbers on it, but they're all under 2 years. That all of the data in the world is doubling in around 16 months. And what that means to you in actual terms, if you look at your DVD collection back in 1998, you had 100 DVDs that sits on one shelf of about 30 pounds, and it's a pretty small little 4-foot section. Today, or about 3 years ago, that would have been 400,000 DVDs, based on the doubling ratio, weighing over 40 tons and taking up 4 miles of shelf space. And I don't know any house that would host all of that DVD knowledge, and that's all just in just a doubling effect. So think about your companies and some of the other massive data houses out there. That's saying that February of 2019, you had 1/2 of the data that you have now. 16-month refresh rate on data, or doubling effect, is pretty massive. And when you start to forecast that into the future with all of the new technologies coming out, there's just more and more data being generated that we can capture and use. And so it's altering the way we think about data from an internal perspective, as well as what other data sources might be there that we can help bundle together and tell some more stories with. Generally speaking, insurance companies been operating for years and years under the guise of we have standardized data types. We collect motor vehicle records. We've got a whole bunch of financial information. We got a lot of statistics that we're able to run internally, and we do a lot with our data. More so in terms of trending within verticals, I'll call it. A lot of underwriting statistics, a lot of claim statistics. Kind of morphed over the years to looking to bundle some of those data types together, and looking at things where what's the correlation of loss ratio with underwriting performance in a certain geography, and that's really where you start to get to the root of some of the challenges that insurance companies are facing. But a lot of these standardized data types, they're all coming from readily available and/or provided information from from the policyholders or the applicants, or whatever the kind of the claimant information is coming from. And it's intake for us. It's given to us. And so what we've done over the years from an insurance industry perspective is we started to bridge out. And from that central core of data that we have and that we're gathering, we're expanding that digital footprint. And this really goes to speak to that volume of data that's being created. Any number of insurers have any number of these tentacles out into the environment, looking to gather more data and more insight. We've moved a lot to online forms, automated underwriting, intelligent workflows, the ability for customers to interface with you on a portal perspective, or more of a platform, and seeing where you are, where their premiums due, how much, a lot of different elements that they can kind of bundle together in terms of their policy. Where, call it 15 years ago, most of that was done in paper, maybe on a CD at some point to mail out, but now everything's being engaged online. So you can even track customer behavior through your digital forms and/or through the portals that you have created to see who's actually interacting with this data and for how long. Is it meaningful? Are we doing things that are beneficial to the customer, or are we doing things because that's the normal way we've done it? But what a lot of this is doing is it's gathering additional data that we're able to utilize. A lot of challenges with some of this. A lot of our legacy systems naturally, have been kind of bundled together over years and years of acquisitions or new systems, or legacy data elements that aren't applicable anymore, or that might have been truncated at a certain point. Who can remember when phone numbers used to only be 7 digits long? And so some of the information that we've gathered in the past, might not be the same as the information we're gathering today. So it presents a lot of challenges as we're kind of growing this digital footprint of being able to kind of right size the data and make sure that we're capturing the correct data, but that we're also utilizing the legacy data in a similar fashion, or it's wasted data, and what are we doing with it? Um, there's a recent survey that was conducted that said about 84% of CEOs globally are concerned about the quality of their data, meaning that the data that they're making informed decisions on, they are uncertain of whether or not it's accurate. 84%, it seems like a staggering number to me. But I guess there's degrees of uncertainty with that. But just goes to show you that data quality and the integrity of what we're making decisions based on is very suspect at this point. And I think it goes to show kind of the change and the evolution of where data is coming from. And we'll discuss a little bit about how we can standardize some of that, right size some of that. Master data management programs have been gaining more and more prevalence through a lot of industries, including insurance, where we're taking a holistic view of data across the enterprise, where it comes in, where it comes from, what formats it in, how it interfaces with our other systems, kind of aggregating it all up into either a data warehouse, a data lake, etc., to be able to aggregate our information to then report cross-platform. And able to do that, I mean, that effort takes some time to be able to standardize a lot of data across multiple legacy systems. But once it's done, the value created and the kind of the standardization that we're implementing for all of these additional touch points going forward just yields tremendous value. There's also a change in a lot of the way that data is being represented. As I mentioned about the phone number, there's been a lot of policy number changing. I'm sure some systems, legacy systems had 8 characters versus 10 characters. There's a lot of difference and nuances that go into it. And all of that, and one of the biggest challenges to any data analytics program is the quality and the usability of the underlying data. So I'd say as you're starting data analytics platforms or strategies, understanding your data, where it's coming from, and what to do with it is critical first steps. Breaking down some of those silos between the organizations. So all of this information that we're looking at here and everything else that we've been talking about in the prior slide with kind of the information that you're intaking, it's generally all structured data. And what do we mean by structured data? Structured data is information that is very organized. There's a high degree of organization. So all of the components around the master data management programs and making sure that things are connected correctly or that they're all standardized across these. Those are really applicable to the standardized, structured data because it's much easier to do it anyway, where it's all coming in the same look, feel, format. And so what structured data is it's got a high degree of organization. Think a database, rows and columns. It's very straightforward to work with. The other side, and one of kind of the early cues of the untapped data that insurance companies have, is this unstructured data. And unstructured data lives in a plethora of places. Anything from Word documents and PDF, which some might say that's somewhat structured, it's written. Written Word isn't necessarily structured. Written Word is searchable if you search for certain things, but it's not database friendly. It doesn't sit in a column or a field, and if it does, it doesn't have the same phraseology. It's not 8 characters of numbers or 10 characters of text. It's very difficult to see. It's normally the field will be defined as 250 characters of text. But how are you going to find similarities across some of those? Where one starts with I, one starts with A, one starts with hi, one starts with the. There's really no similarity across any of those free text fields. So unstructured data, what it does is it looks at kind of the components that make up the data piece. And look to see if we can pull and extract out information from that, and then recategorize that into some look and feel that we're looking to use it for. And then we can use that also to categorize data, make decisions based off of, or really just get more insight out of the information we already have. How we would do some of that is really around, what we like to call the shuffle process. You take data in from multiple different input sources. Generally, what you have is you have a lot of different data types and data elements mixed in different sources. So if you think about, one policy administration system, might have a lot of different tables within it. And within each table, there's a whole bunch of different information. If you're looking at it from like a true database perspective, you can associate tables, and you can start to see aspects around it, in terms of what's our policy. Can we link on policy count, policy number, premiums and claims, and start to see correlations between kind of your basic blocking and tackling stuff. What really is beneficial is if you kind of sift all that together into a kind of a massive data lake of some sort, where there's searchable data and context across all. And when you can shuffle and sort this information that's coming from all these different pieces, you start to group, and you can almost put them into affinity groups and be able to really drive more value out of it, because now you're looking at things in like terms. You're able to pull certain elements out of unstructured data and bundle that into your existing structured data, and you get a lot more benefit. And the positive with some of these tools is, once it's built, once you're able to go into your discovery phase, which is really one of the founding building blocks of data storytelling. When you're looking to set up your analytics, your model, your center of excellence, you're trying to build a strategy around data analytics, really understanding where you want to end, and how we like to call it, and a lot of others in some innovation shops like to look at it. It's backwards forwards. Looking at where we want to end. What's our future state? What do we want to be? And what types of data do we have, and what types of data do we need to be able to get there? And really doing kind of a define end state and develop our gap assessment to where we're going to get there. The maturity model itself, kind of depicted here. It starts from very foundational. Let's just manage our data better, and then let's do some operational reporting. I'm sure every organization, every insurance organization especially, is doing some sort of hindsight reporting on our loss ratios, our combined ratios. Obviously, it's just kind of calculated. Excuse me. And looking at kind of the hindsight descriptive what happened. Where we're starting to see more more visibility within the insurance industry is into this insight and almost up into the foresight perspective, where we're looking at a guided discovery session around our data, and what additional data elements can we pull in, as we were talking about, and start to tell a story of figuring out what is it that we want to uncover with this, like what are we missing. And it's a very iterative process, as we'll see. But what it starts to do is you start to get a little learning, use that to learn more, use that to learn more, and you start to really drive into finding the root cause. Similar to any, if you think of like a design thinking, workshop where you're trying to find that root cause problem, you ask why 5 times. It's a very similar concept of we try to uncover data more and more and more to find the root problem of what we're trying to solve for. And what we determine then is actionable intelligence comes out at that layer. A lot of times, if you just have a hindsight analysis, you can see that one thing might be correlated to the other, but you really don't know why. And so unpacking that why through further analysis and detailed further review and iterative discovery is really where we get to that why. On the foresight, once we have a lot of our data structured and we're able to pull in the necessary information, this is really where our advanced analytics take over. And the top half here is really all on our advanced. And when you think about it, it's a lot of, how do we build a tool that will be able to predict what might happen based off of historical trends and analyses. It's predictive analytics. Pushing up into how do we then use that information to make decisions? How do we decision automate some of these processes based off of historical legacy data? Or data that we have now, but we have rule engines built in that we're able to determine the outcome of some of these things. Think automated underwriting, where we have decision engines built, and based off of our historical data's knowledge has told us this. We've built rules around that. And as data elements are coming into us, it's categorizing and calculating on the fly and pushing those decision trees into whatever it needs to. It's truly an automated process at that point. This is where I view kind of analytics and automation as one leads to the other. It's hard to automate something other than a robotic process automation where it's point and click and automated tasks. But it's hard to get true decision automation without an intelligent automation, without having solid, sound data to really be able to work off of. And a lot of times that data is coming from multiple sources internal, external, structured, unstructured. So to put a lot of this into perspective, a lot of insurance companies, they start in the maturity model at the end and continue to grow, start to predict, start to model. On the flip side, we have insurtech companies that are trying to jump in at the top and are trying to kind of trump a lot of the other things that are going on with the other insurance carriers in the middle layer and bottom layer, saying we can do data and analytics and AI and all of the other aspects with it extremely well. One of which is Lemonade. I found this video the other day that I thought was really well put together for a 1-minute video to be able to summarize and see the different pieces that go together. So as you're watching this, I advise just to take a look at the different connection points that it has with data, both from an internal perspective, how it's capturing data, how it's pulling data from external sources, making decisions based on that data, and it's all done through a bot. It's just one quick application that's showcasing the entire process. So not advocating for Lemonade at all. Obviously, they're not a mutual insurance company and they're not a legacy carrier. Just I thought the intricacies of how their application is responding and integrating with data sources kind of speaks to the volume of the maturity factor that the technology-led organizations can have. And I mean that process is really seamless, and obviously it worked well because it's the video that they put on the website. But just the kind of food for thought as we started looking through this, there was elements of structured data in there. There's elements of unstructured data. There's video recordings for claim notices, and then how do we search that information on the back end? There's a lot of other data engineering aspects that come out of this, but it's a nice depiction of what the maturity level could get to. If we're starting at just kind of what are the analytical use cases that we're trying to solve for here, though. There's a lot that insurance companies are looking to do with analytics across the spectrum. Whether it's trying to increase market share through automated life event marketing. If this happens, or if we're able to pull this data from a social media account or something, and we're able to then market and be first in line. Hey, you have a policy with us. How about having another one? Being able to predict what claim volume might look like in a certain scenario, or within certain industries or geographies. Being able to look at your risk assessments in a little bit more data-driven light. Being able to automate some of those, or pick the right price mix as we're looking from an actuarial price determination. Most of what actuaries are doing are data and statistics. That's what data science is. That's kind of the foundation of it. So can we build more algorithm-based pricing models that we're able to automate and maybe get speed to market a little bit faster, to be able to put our products out there in the customer's hands when they need it or when they're looking to buy. Fraud detection. There's a lot of or maybe not a lot of organizations, but there's organizations right now that are looking at using analytics and more so AI to determine fraud in forms, not fraud reporting, but how people are interacting within the form itself. So if you're looking to put social security numbers in, if you put the wrong social security number in more than 2 times, I'm guaranteeing you it's not your social security number. And if you copy and pasted your social security number, it is certainly not your social security number. I don't know where I would even copy my security number from. So if you're interacting with the form in a different light, you can flag those immediately for fraud. There's not somebody that's copying and pasting hundreds of social security numbers to try to get new applications. Something is going on and we should take a look at it. There's triaging of claims. You might have some examiners that are or some claims adjusters that are extremely good at one thing and other claims adjusters that are extremely good at something else. So as the claim comes in, can we use the data elements that are being reported to be able to triage it to the right person to be able to close that claim quickly and ultimately at minimal cost? Can we use it from a personalization and a brand customer and loyalty perspective? We know our customers, we have all their data. We know how to get the additional data from the websites and from social media. Can we bundle that together to improve our brand loyalty and our customer satisfaction? And then the last 2 here are ones that we'll walk through the rest here with kind of some case studies. But customer segmentation. How are we touching the right customers? How do we make sure that we are casting a wide enough net, but also getting to the right medium and the right people at the right time? And then reinsurance analytics. We have a project that we did that we ended up massive cost savings or cost recoupment, I'll call it, by finding and identifying claims that were subject to reinsurance that weren't tagged for reinsurance to begin with. And we did that all through unstructured data analysis. So customer segmentation. There's a company, large organization, looking to they're one of the market leaders in home products, and looking to really get better grasp on their customer. They were losing market share. Their customers were trying to find new ways to engage with them, trying to take the insurance business from transactional to operational, trying to be more of a partner with our customers. And they were currently segmenting just based off of some basic information, demographic info, not really using the consumer behavior or the persona. How are they? What are they doing? Why are they doing it? If we use the data to undercover a little bit more of this and tell a story of why do customers come to us, why don't customers come to us, we might have been able to see where we were successful and where we weren't successful early on. But they came to us looking for kind of a different perspective on how to segment their customer base. So we did a lot of behavioral analytics, identified additional data source collection. Sometimes data just isn't available, and you're looking to gather some of that information. So over time, you can build a data collection plan that as you're interfacing with your customers on the go-forward basis, you can collect the necessary data to build those intricate models or the advanced analytics that you need to really drive the behavior you want. So if you don't have it today, understanding what you need and where you're looking to go, you can start to collect that information and kind of make better decisions based off of it in the after it's collected. What we're able to do is we determined that out of the 10 unique customer segments, we pushed them to make more tactical decisions on whether or not they were the right segments based off of collecting some of this information. And we uncovered other areas, other segments of the business that they really hadn't thought about before. We improved their root cause analysis process of why they lost business and why they lost customers. And we expanded their geospatial data to understand, is there a geographic disparity in terms of when they win, when they lose business. And it really set the foundation for a predictive model in the future in terms of how they're looking at new market expansion, new product rollouts. How do we proactively target customers and clients, or does this product make sense for this market? As long as we have that behavioral data, we can use it for more predictive models in terms of whether or not it's a good ROI for our own investment. A lot of that was driven on unstructured data. And I know I defined it a little bit earlier, but what do I mean by it? Anything that is out there in the internet is data and its source, and at some point, in some way, in some fashion, you can extract tangible elements of it to use for certain outcomes or certain instances. So YouTube users upload 48 hours of new video every minute of every day. It's every minute of every day. That's insane. 571 new websites, full websites are created every minute. There's 34,000 new likes on Facebook, just for brands and organizations. Essentially, what it comes down to is there's 44 times more data in 2020 than there was 11 years ago. 44 times greater. So when you pull all that down, what it really means is that every person in the US could tweet 3 times a minute for 30,000 years, essentially, just to create that same amount of data. That's just an endless amount of information. But what's important about this is it's all outside your organization, and it's all unstructured. And even some of the unstructured data within your organization is not being utilized. About 50% of all the company's data is unstructured. The only data you have that is structured are the things that are in some of your applications in the databases underneath. But other things like claim notes, PDF forms, email exchanges, a lot of this information is very unstructured in format. But it is searchable, and you can get information out of it. There are very few companies really doing it. And I personally view this as one of the untapped markets within an insurance company to get additional information to bundle with their structured data to really drive more outcomes and more improvements. So putting that into perspective and kind of how it was used or how might it be used, there was a pharmaceutical company that was looking to understand their patient needs. And so what they did is they call it digital listening. We went out and looked at deploying unstructured conversation, pulling it from the website, essentially social media. Who's talking about what and what are our patients doing? What do they need to do? What are their ailments? What are they looking to struggle with? We use natural language processing to kind of pre-process and cluster this information. So clustering is just taking things that have like terms and grouping them, almost like an affinity group within your data structures. And we clustered them to see what kind of correlations might there be. And then there was an unsupervised algorithm running that really uncovered key conversational topics. Those conversations then identified either affirmed what the client was looking to do or discovered unmet needs in other areas that the customer is looking for, the patient is looking for guidance on, and they're just not unable to find it. Whether it's drug information or an insurance lens, call it a life insurance company. How much is too much? When should I be looking to improve policy? What does my investment portfolio need to look like? There's a lot of these other things that if we're our advisors are doing that, but if we can see what's being talked about externally as well, we really start to uncover additional sources to figure out a little bit more about our customer personas. We can do that internally with our own data. There's a text analytics is becoming extremely, I don't want to call it easy, but more simple to do with a lot of what I'll call microservices on the shelf of organizations that you can pull down and convert text and PDFs, etc., to searchable free text fields through an optical character recognition OCR, or a natural language processor just to listen for words that are being said through phone calls or emails. Think of Alexa, Siri, all of the chat bots or the virtual assistants. Yes, they are listening always. I think my phone just lit up when I said Siri, but they are listening always. And what they're doing is they're looking for key terms, keywords. And we can do the same thing with a lot of our either emails or phone calls, just the whole digital listening aspect. But in this case study, in this scenario, there was a law firm, and for claim litigation, I'm sure you deal with a handful of this as well. There's a lot of hundreds of thousands of documents sent over in the discovery session. It would have taken attorneys at a high bill rate a ton of hours to kind of sift through all this and find out what was relevant, what mattered. We built a text analytic for them and search through for keywords, key search terms, key correlations of activities to try to see and weed through those hundreds of thousands of documents to figure out what mattered. And we were able to exclude 87% of all the documents they sent over. Talk about getting buried in data and information. 87% of what they sent over wasn't relevant to the case at all. But what we were able to do was we were able to weed through all of that and really focus only on what mattered. And when we were able to do that, we were able to have a much better outcome, lower cost to outcome, a lower cost to recovery, and able to deliver more benefits across the board. Similarly, we applied the same principles to text notes, claim notes within claim portfolio. And so this is a reinsurance case study. What happened here was client had about 110 million claim notes across a little over 2 million claims. And they wanted to know how many were actually tagged and flagged and reported for reinsurance recoveries. They noticed that the reinsurance recoveries didn't seem in line with what they needed to. So we took a statistical approach to it, as well as using unstructured data analysis to come to what should we care about and what should we focus on. If they were to review this manually, it would have taken forever, over 110 million claim notes. If they just looked at the claims themselves and saw what might have been necessary based on what was flagged, they still would have looked at 30 million claim notes, and it was only 40% accurate. So what we did is we used a statistical analysis to target, which claims might have the most impact, and which might be subject to reinsurance, and or what's going to give us our highest investment if we target it, based off of the level of claim, the applicability of reinsurance, how much would that be. And what we did is we realized that we could target 1 million claim note entries over 20,000 claims. And the statistics, it reduced exponentially, but the accuracy rate went up equally. 94% accurate. Also identified 2,000 new claims that weren't flagged for reinsurance at all. And what it resulted in is about $50 million in additional revenue to the client for over a 5-year period. So about 10 million a year. What that actually looks like, if you want to see the data, the math behind that. There's a lot of statistics, but really the key factor is the assumption of $9,000 was the average claim value being reported, and the assumption was that you would recoup about 2,000 of that, and that was based on statistical analysis of what was the history of the client, and based on all of that information and everything I just said in terms of how we went about kind of structuring it and identifying it, we were able to identify just under $11 million of recoveries that year alone, which then extrapolated out over 5 years, easily over 50 million. This is a very common scenario across a lot of P&C insurers, especially in terms of the difficulty to flag reinsurance claims, and all the reinsurance treaties, especially with multiple treaties and different layers, and some facultative and some quota share, etc. It's very difficult to identify what is applicable to what, unless you have a sophisticated system for tracking that. Unstructured data analysis is kind of a way around that, where we can kind of go right to the source in the claim notes and look for very popular or likely reinsurance reportable claims, and then focus our efforts there. And I think the revenue or the value kind of speaks for itself. I thought this was a fantastic example when we were walking through it, but the outcome really, I found it very hard to believe at first. I had to go back through and make sure that we weren't carrying a zero in the wrong place or something. But no, it's a pretty remarkable recovery. Goes to show you, maybe they weren't doing a very good job of flagging reinsurance, but maybe they were, and they were just like everybody else, and there was errors that happened. So lot that can be done with unstructured data. I view it as the largest untapped resource inside an insurance company, and even externally from a customer behavior perspective. So data storytelling. The whole front end of this has all been about, let's talk about analytics. Let's talk about the different types. What are some of the untapped resources to be able to do it? But once you have the data, once you have the information, how do you pull the most insight out of it? How do you make the stories understood, and how do you get them to really want to enact on some of the data? A great dashboard is a great dashboard, but if you have to look into it and sit back and think, well, what does this mean? It's probably not a very intuitive or effective communication tool. The actionable intelligence that you can drive from data, I think, is what sets very experienced and mature analytic models apart from some of the basic blocking and tackling of plugging a Tableau or Power BI in and just showing what the trend has been. And it's like, what does that mean? Like, why is it trending that way? And really, data storytelling is how we get people to resonate with some of those things. There's a kind of common knowledge that 60% of people remember stories, but only 5% of people remember statistics. And the reason is, you hear a stat and you hear it, but you don't feel it. There's nothing that resonates with you. I'm a golfer and I hit a good golf shot. It resonates like, oh, I remember that muscle memory. Like I won't forget that. But people remember like the interactions you have and the experiences and the stories that are being generated and told. You don't really remember numbers on a page. So when you look at a lot of notes on pieces of paper, they're very rarely something that happened in the day. It's most of the time it's a number or something I have to remember to do because they're very tactical. It's the feeling you get from kind of bringing that logic and that emotion together. And that's really where the data storytelling piece comes together. It's bridging that logic and the emotion gap, where emotion is going to get you to enact something and logic is going to get you to realize it's the correct thing to do. And that's where data storytelling really comes in. And so how do we do data? How do we tell stories with data? It seems stupid, right? You're getting numbers and text and fields, and you're looking to tell a story with it. What does that mean? It's really problem solving, and it's really getting a narrative behind what we're looking for and where it's headed. Albert Einstein is one of my favorite quotes of all time. Is if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about solutions. So the old adage that the problem far exceeds the solution. If we can find the root cause of the situation, we can solve the root cause and it solves all of the downstream problems. But if we try to just push solutions into a problem, a lot of times it's a Band-Aid. And we fix it now, but we break something else down the line, or it just goes right back to where it was. So spending additional effort at the front end of, what's our analysis, do it again, do it again, do it again, get to a kind of a root cause of where is it coming from and why, is critical in terms of being able to get people to buy in. Data storytelling takes, I like to call it a journey. So where it starts from is you get the background and the context of what you're looking to do and what you want to discover. And it's a very iterative insight process where you take the data, you analyze it, you see, what correlations exist. And if you've ever worked with, kind of large data sets, once you have the data structured in a format that you're able to actually use, which is normally one of the biggest challenges, the data wrangling piece, then you get a lot into this exploration. And really that's where a lot of the insights are driven from. A lot of times I'll get a data set and someone will say, well, what are you going to do with it? Like, I don't know. I really don't know what it's going to tell me yet. The whole point is, look at it, correlate things that you expect to have correlation and see what pops out that doesn't make sense. Look into that a little bit. Continue to uncover, the little nuggets that doesn't seem right. Or it's like, oh, that's an interesting discovery. Let's look more. Always push a little bit harder into some of those elements, some of those areas where there's a little uncertainty, or what can we do, in this area? Why did this thing happen? Through this exploration, share your findings with people, get better understanding of, oh, well, that's a false positive because this one scenario happened, or, oh, that's interesting. Look more, look deeper on that one because that's something that could really be insightful. And then after a while, you get that aha moment. There's always that this is why, and that aha moment really starts to be the pinnacle here of pushing it downhill. Of we discovered what was wrong, or we discovered what we need to know. Now let's build actionable intelligence. I hate that term, using it all the time, but build actionable data, insights, whatever out of it, and drive solutions, make recommendations, enact next steps. What we realize then is we've improved our business insight just by having all of these things. You're not going to make the decision, see what you saw, develop next steps, and then go right back to square one. You're constantly moving up this evolution. You start at the ground floor, but once you uncover these things, your solution, you're going to implement your solution. Okay, fine. But you don't lose all that institutional knowledge. Those are the details that Jeff Bezos was talking about at the beginning of the session here. Those details, those correlations, those understandings, those are the things that are transferable, throughout our organizations and throughout our business. So those pieces and the actionable intelligence that comes out of it is really what makes data storytelling more important, in my mind, than just pure dashboards. So what are the elements of a good story or a data storytelling? Well, it really, there's a couple of key pieces here. There's the data and the infrastructure and how it's created and how it's stored and managed, and can you use it in an intelligent way? Kind of the first half of our segment here. Then there's the story, which we'll talk about in a second, and then it's the visual, the communication element of it. Really the empathy of what we're looking to do and the exploration aspect of how we're doing it and what we're getting through, enlightens the story, and it gives you the ability to produce a visual that makes sense, that has intelligence on it, that people want and that people are going to act upon, not just something that people are going to look at and see a trend and say, okay, thank you, but somebody's like, oh yeah, I can do that. Very targeted, actionable insight that's driven out of it, and that produces data-driven behaviors. That's where we're able to use data to make decisions, based off of the criteria. That starts to push us into kind of the artificial intelligence world, and being able to use our data to do more decision automation engines. And really, around here, the core element that you get insight from is the bundling of the three. When you have the right data and you're able to formulate the correct story, utilizing the right narrative, solving and defining the right problems, and then communicating it in the right visual, that's where true insight lies. And that's where you're able to pull out that insight to be able to communicate it. And once it's out, it's out. Then you're able to utilize it multiple times, month over month, year over year, and then it becomes a new KPI. And it's a new way of tracking, how are we doing with these challenges we had in the past. I have a former client of mine that has a dashboard of all former KPIs. It's all things that they uncovered and then solved for, but they keep them on the list because they want to make sure that they're not going to bubble back up. It's like a reverse risk assessment, making sure that the things that we fixed aren't broken again. And so it's a way to track and make sure that our organization is continuing to push forward. So some of the storytelling elements, there's 5 real essential elements to a good story. You need to have a point. There's no point to what you're saying. There's no point in saying it. There has to be explanatory process. You have to explain what it is, but not so much what it is, why and how. What is the problem? Where are we going? All these different things. But it's really the why did it happen and how are we going to fix it? Those are the real elements of a good story. And if you think about any movie or anything else, there's always a why people are doing, and there's also a very linear transaction to the way things are going. There's a question that just came in about what tools do you suggest to help visualize the data. There's a lot out there depending on the platform you're working with and the platform you're running off of. Once you get to this far side here on the visualization front, if you're in some of the cloud vendors, and I won't name names, but some of the cloud vendors have their own proprietary software that they're utilizing to create visualizations out of. Very similar to like a Tableau or a Power BI. Tableau, Power BI, Click are kind of the 3 that you see more or most prevalently. There's a lot of others as well, a lot of mid-size and or kind of emerging things. The nice part about the couple of those is they plug into a lot of different data sources pretty intuitively in terms of data warehouses or applications. You can plug, obviously Tableau is owned by Salesforce now, easy to plug into Salesforce. It's easy to plug into a lot of those things. And the one thing I would say is if you asked me maybe 10 years ago how many people know what an API is, I'd probably tell you on one hand. Now there's probably, I could tell you on one hand the people that don't know what an API is. API, by the way, it's a way to get data out. It's a application protocol interface. It's a way to get data out of other applications. But it enables you to connect a lot of these different things. Most of the visualization platforms have native API capability into a lot of other applications and or most databases that are being used to host applications, call it AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, etc. You can connect a lot of those to those. So those are probably the most prevalent, most common. And really kind of the piece with the visualization is, with the elements that are going to be visualized and shown on it, it's critical that they have some sort of, narrative or context to them, not just data on a page, but, what does this data mean? And I think that's really the data storytelling component that we're trying to get across here. So, and this is what I meant by that last comment. Dashboards are great from a visualization perspective. Automated reporting is easy. in terms of being able to do. Sometimes it's visual, sometimes it's not. But they don't really provide a lot of those other elements that a good story has. There's no narrative, there's no sequence. You don't know how we got here. There's no explanation, and there's no why. It doesn't tell you why this matters or why we looked into it in the first place. When you start to get up, push the umbrella up here to the top side on the data storytelling, oftentimes there's a lot of these pieces included, but there's always a linear progression on how we got there. And that kind of goes back to the inverted V of, we started working up with iterative discovery and analysis. And it was a very linear way in terms of how we got there. One thing led to another, led to another, led to another, and then we had our moment, and now we realize what we need to do. And now we need to package the narrative and conversation around it to allow others to do something with it. Building your team. We've got just under 10 minutes to go. So building your team. Analytics teams are really come I think probably full circle. There's really two schools of thought within an analytics team. You need to have your data side, and you need to have your creative side. It's kind of two sides of the brain. On the creative side, you need to have critical thinking capabilities, creativity, business acumen, problem solving, curiosity, and communication skills. The ability to take the information that the data scientists are providing, explore it, be creative, be curious, continue to push the envelope to see what we need to come out with it, and then have the innate ability to communicate that information so that it is actionable. There is intelligence driven from it. And then on the data side, those people would not have anything to report unless there's structured data, unless the unstructured data is converted and or exported. But there needs to be some sort of technical development in terms of being able to get the data into the needed formats. Data management programs, data scientists, the ability to wrangle the different data elements and standardize it into the formats you need. And sometimes just your pure and basic, you need to query the system to get data out. Just somebody to be able to pull the information out. So really what a good analytics team has is both sides of the spectrum, the business and the artist. Being able to have the data piece and have the creativity and curiosity to not stop, to keep pushing it and get the insight that you need. Critical success factors to your analytic team: set your digital strategy and your data strategy. On that maturity model, where do you want to end? What do you want? A lot of times, you can overbuild an analytic, like a data lake, when you don't really need that. If you're just looking to do basic, fundamental, foundational data analytics, you don't need to put something in AWS on a huge data lake with a machine learning algorithm that's going to learn a lot of things. You don't need that. If you're looking to do something very foundational, you need an on-premises data warehouse that pulls data from your different systems so it's all together, or a Tableau or something that plugs into multiple sources. That you can pull the data and aggregate it up and then do some visualizations out of. I'll caution on that. There will be, if you go with Tableau for that, you will need a prep version that helps to standardize the data in like a staging area behind the scenes. But you can do the same thing without having to formally create a data warehouse. You can do the same thing with others like AWS, etc. But having that strategy and setting what do we want to do and where do we want to be. And if you define where you want to be and put a roadmap together on how you're going to get there, you can save a lot of time, a lot of cost, and really just drive value back into the business. Recruit that diverse skill set, the left and the right brain. Pull the right people, bring them in, pair them together. Think about it like a creative marketing agency. There's always an artist and there's always a story. So a lot of times it's not the same person. There's partnerships in a lot of these things. A Jobs and a Wozniak. There's the business side, the tech side, and the business or the curiosity, creativity side. But then create and foster that culture of creativity, that culture of curiosity and innovation. Always look for the next best thing. There's no need to kind of status quo everything. If we continue to push for success and push forward, I think you'll find great value in data analytics and storytelling. And invest for success. Some of these early stage data analytic projects, especially on the database management side, structuring your data in the way you need, it's not cheap. They're not ultra expensive, depending on what you want, but there will be an investment that will be needed if you want to make this a very mature application of some of these things. So invest for the success early on. And then a lot of those other attributes on the top side of that maturity model start to come a little easier. Your decision automations, your just your predictive analytics, and or how we want to target customers. Your ROI on an early investment in technology is pretty exponential when it comes to data and analytics. One case study around that as we wrap up here. There's a case study of a Formula One team that implemented a whole bunch of Microsoft products, the Azure cloud with Power BI, etc. It was a pretty expensive project. They annually spent over $2 million. It was a very large organization, obviously, but the ROI, the benefit reported based off of the cost was $4.60 for every dollar spent. So 4.6 to 1. Return on profit just in year 1, 2, or year 3, I guess, is when they actually reported the data out. But it's an exponential improvement, and it's just a foundational layer that's set. And what you can do externally, or kind of tangentially to some of those initial projects, I think would even further accelerate that 4.6. There's true value in some of these ROI for the early stage investments in technology as it relates to data management and analytics. So that's all I had for today. I know question and answer is a little difficult on webinar. I have been monitoring the Q&A. There isn't anything there, but would love to hear from you. Would love to hear thoughts, questions. I'll be around, obviously, for the foreseeable future on the internet through Zoom, etc. As we're still living in this new normal. So please reach out. There's my email, my phone number. I'm always around. Looking forward to sharing thoughts with like-minded people. So appreciate you joining. Appreciate the time. Thank you for PAMIC for having me. This was great. Appreciate the opportunity to share some data and some stories. But looking forward to continuing our conversation. Thanks, everybody.